Good morning, this is Robert with Pioneer Smokehouses, and today we're going to do some salmon on my Char-Griller Smokin Pro E1224. Now this is not something you would traditionally do a low temperature smoke like a jerky or a salmon or even the cheese. I did that cheese a couple of weeks ago, and now I want to show you that you can do salmon. It just happens to be salmon season, and the first thing that I do when salmon season starts up is I take whatever's left in my freezer and I go ahead and smoke it. It wasn't a lot, so I did add a fresh salmon, and I'll see if I can get a little picture of that up here for you just as a little treat. Now I do also a fishing website and channel. It's not a really big channel, it's just a few videos here and there, and I like to add some stuff just for fun, not really focused on products or anything like that. Now what we're doing today is we're going to go ahead and set this up. First thing I did was yesterday I went ahead and brined my salmon. So that's frozen salmon that was left over from last season, and then one fillet of fresh salmon. And I'll go ahead and show you some pictures here. First thing I did was I took it and I cut it all up in 2-inch strips. That way we get a lot of surface area for the smoke and the brine to stick to, and that way we can get all the flavor spread evenly throughout the salmon. Then what I did was I soaked it in the cooled brine. So I made the brine first, then I cooled it down, and you see here at the last stage I actually used ice. So I had just enough liquid so that way I could dissolve the salt and the brown sugar and the honey and get it all mixed in. It's really important to get that salt all dissolved in there. If you don't get all the honey or the brown sugar, you'll live. And then I use light brown sugar, so I put a tablespoon of molasses in there to make up for it. Normally I would use dark brown, but I happen to have a whole bag of light brown sugar that I thought I needed to use up, so I went ahead and used that, and the dark brown sugar has molasses, so if you just add a touch, you'll get that same taste profile. Then I soaked it overnight. During the soaking process, I did two things. First of all, I submerged it by placing a circle cooling tray on top and putting a couple of small plates to hold it down the salmon in the liquid so it stayed submerged all the time. And then I flipped the salmon twice. So once before bedtime I flipped it and I just reached in there and stirred it around a little bit, and then had to wash my hands a couple of times because they smelled like fish, and you don't want to go to bed like that. And then first thing this morning before I made my coffee, I went in there and I stirred it again so that way I could make sure that there were no spots that did not get good brine contact. Now the first stir is the most important, but the last one just kind of makes me feel better. Then what I did was I went ahead and I spread it out on some trays so it will get a few minutes to dry. Now I'm not a big fan of the pellicene layer. I believe that it actually inhibits smoke. Stuff on the surface will stick to it better, but I don't think that it penetrates as well, so I try to avoid it. But I do want my salmon completely dry. So I lay it out on the rack, I let it dry, and if it's too wet, I'll pat it with a paper towel, which today it was not, and then I'll sprinkle brown sugar and possibly honey on top. Today I didn't add any honey because just the smell of it just told me that it was flavored the way I wanted it, and I'm kind of trying to cut back on the sugars a little bit. I do some keto, and so I don't want to, sabotage myself by putting a bunch of extra sugar. And there'll be plenty of good honey flavor in there with the brine, but also a sprinkling of brown sugar on the top. Now, sometimes what I like to do is I like to add some red pepper flakes or some Cajun or even just some black pepper to the top of some of the pieces to give them an extra little bit of a kick. So let's go ahead and move on to here and start with what I've done here. Now I took a couple of pictures so you'll be able to see here. What I did was I have my V pattern set up with my extra grill racks that I custom cut to fit in there, and I just filled that pattern. And then I took the pieces that were in the corner over there and I put them inside the charcoal chimney. And then let me show you a picture of me lighting the charcoal chimney, and then I'll grab that for you. Now, I set this down on the ground on a couple of blocks so that way I can give it a little spacer for air. Also, another good way to do that is just to set it directly on your grill rack like that, and then it'll give it more airflow to go in. Now, the only downside is that as it's burning, the ashes will drop, so I usually use 2 bricks on some gravel over off to the side out of the camera view here. I got this going really good the way I like it. I can shake it up a little bit, but don't shake it up near anything burnable because sparks always come off a lump charcoal pretty good. And then I'm just going to pour it right in here in the corner. I always set the charcoal chimney underneath the firebox when it's still hot. That way it's in a spot where you know that you don't want to bump into it or get burned by it or anything. I'm going to work all of these lit charcoals all the way back out to the edge here. Then I'm going to take this block. I've already placed some blocks in there, and they're strategically placed so that way as the fire burns, they will individually burn. You want to keep them almost about 2 inches apart so that way they don't act like a wick. If you have them touching each other, the minute one starts burning, the next one will start burning. I did put some smaller wood chips down in the bottom and the bed where I light it because I want it to start off smoking right away. And I'm just going to add this one right in here on the back. So what I want you to see from that picture there is that if you look down in the firebox here, you'll see that all of the charcoal is started right by the vent and it's open fully. Once it gets going, because we want to maintain the temperature, this is one of the few times where I will probably cut back the vents, but I need it to go really good first. And I also need to make sure that this is in all the way. Okay, we don't want any extra air gaps, so that way we can control what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and close this really quick to make sure everything is working and the smoke is flowing through. We can already see smoke coming out of the stack, and that means we are good to go. So let's take a quick break while I go grab that salmon off the kitchen counter that I prepared earlier. So here's one of the 2 trays of salmon that I have prepared. I'm going to bring it real close up here so that way you can see it. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a light glaze on there, and that glaze is just brown sugar that melted in. Now this is dark brown sugar that I put on the top. And if you see here in this picture, I used a regular flour sifter to spread that. I like to do that because it prevents it from being chunky. You just want to make sure that when you spread it that you cover the top middle really well, because as it heats, the brown sugar will kind of roll down the salmon, and that'll be great for a good, nice cover. And it doesn't, like I said, on the edges, you don't have to worry so much about it. And then that'll cover it really good. Now, we've had a chance to get the smoker about halfway up to temperature. And I'm going to go ahead and load this, and the smoke has settled down just a little bit. You can see that the initial smoke is kind of burned off. I pre-did this on a grill mat, and again, I can't tell you enough that grill mats are just my favorite thing in the world. I go ahead and put that all in there, and I'm going to give it a little gap from the edge because I know that the hot spot a little bit there and a bunch here. And I want to avoid uneven temperatures in this cooking process. Something else I want to point out is that you see these pieces. Now, I'm going to show you these pieces. These are all the smaller ones. I deliberately separate them out to where the chunkier pieces are all on one and the smaller, shorter pieces are on the other. That way, if one gets done before the other, I can pull it out. And I don't have to pull them both together. See how easy it was just to slide that grill mat right out onto the smoker, and then I can position it and I don't have to worry about it, and most likely it probably won't stick at all. And then if the skin sticks just a little bit to the grill mat, that's fine, because I would just as soon throw the skin away before I vacuum seal this stuff. So you can see there's still a little bit of smoke coming out there. We're going to go ahead and close this for a second while I get rid of this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my probes. I have 2 probes here, and what I'm going to do is kind of separate them so I can keep track of them. When I do this like this with the 2 probes, I'm going to take this at a sideways angle, so this side will be 1 probe. Let's turn it on so you can see that. You can see the 2 different readouts here. This side will be this probe, and this side will be the second probe. So I'll put this one all the way over here, and I'm going to take it in there, and I'm just going to set it in the grill mat itself, not in the meat. Try not to touch the metal rack. That'll mess up your temperature. Get it right in there. So the probe senses the temperature in about the last inch of it, so the shaft itself doesn't really sense temperature, but it will conduct it. So you don't want it to touch metal, because then it can heat your probe up and make it think that the temperature is higher than it is. So right now we've got those in there and they're slowly working up in temperature. And one says 81 and the other one says 79. We need to get this up into the 165 to 175 range. My perfect spot would be right around 175, maybe 173. I do not want to go above 180, because then we'll actually be cooking the salmon more than smoking it. You can see that we're still getting plenty of smoke through there, so we don't need to worry about that. If the smoke level comes down lower than what we want, then we'll want to add blocks. This is one of the cases where your smoke is not as a concern about being dirty as it is if you're doing something like meat. If you're doing brisket or you're doing pork butt, you really want to keep that smoke really clean, because it can tend to get bitter. But when you're smoking a salmon like this, a little bit more smoke is better than not enough. Now, I'm going to watch this temperature here, and the gauge itself is coming up to about 140. Now, it's not detailed marks, so if you want to get something like that, you'll probably have to replace the gauge. This gauge here has a mark at 100 degrees and a mark at 200 degrees, 300, 400, 500, and then some little hash marks between. And there's 4 of them, so there's no like right in the middle. But the gauge itself is pointing right in the middle now, so that would imply that the temperature is 150 degrees right here. So I'm looking at this, and the surface temperature on this side is 120, and the surface temperature on this side is 93. So we'll need to bring that up a little bit. Couple of different ways you can do that. One way is that you could add some small dry wood blocks right into the fire, and that'll boost that temperature really quick, and then they won't last very long. So let's start by going ahead and giving that a little try and seeing if we can get that to happen. I don't want to have it pop up with a really large flame. That'll just cause a lot of burning, and the temperature will get way above what we're going for. And we're still moving up, so I'm not that concerned yet. Now, you can use wood chunks out of a different brand. I just have some chunks that are left in the bottom of this bag of pecan. Pecan is not my normal wood that I use with salmon. Normally, I would use something like a hickory or some like oak. Mesquite can get a little too strong if you're doing a long smoke, but in an electric smoker, you can use mesquite for the first 2 pans. In this kind of thing, since it's going to be smoking continually through there, you don't really want to use something strong like mesquite. And you can see right here, we opened it up and a couple of these blocks of wood have actually caught on fire. I'm going to go ahead and put a few more pieces right in there directly on the charcoals and get that closed, because I don't want that fire to get out of control. So we're going to go ahead and take a little break here, because the temperature is still going up and I'm just going to need to watch it for a few minutes. Now, that'll just be a second for you, so I'll be right back. So it's been just long enough for me to get a cup of coffee and come back out here, and then I went ahead and checked the temperature. We're running 185 on this side and 140 on this side. I might slide the salmon over just a little bit and move the probes around so I can get a little bit better idea. One of the saving graces is that because I put the thicker salmon on the hotter side, that should be okay there. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slow the vents down. So I'm going to close them halfway. And then I'm going to close this one halfway. Normally cooking something like brisket or pork butt, I would never do that. I would always want to leave it open and adjust the fire more. But what we have there for our fire is what we got. Now, I went ahead and brought out some Cajun seasoning, and this is Spice Hunter, and I really like the Spice Hunter stuff. Sometimes I buy some bulk things for like pepper and things like that, but for all my small spices, I buy theirs. And I'm gonna go along here, and I think these two pieces right here in the middle, I'm gonna spice with this. This is not spicy at all. It just has a real nice sweet Cajun smell to it, or flavor. Just like the brown sugar, you want to make sure that you only put it heavy right on the middle and then lightly out on the edges, and then it should be just fine. After I turn the camera off, I'm going to go ahead and slide these over just a little bit and see if I can get them out of the hot spots, and then move the thermometers around a little bit to make sure that I know the temperature. Then I'm going to let it go ahead and smoke at right around 175 degrees for about 4 hours before I do anything else. So that means I'll be sitting out here with a cup of coffee and watching YouTube videos, so you should do the same. It'll only be a second for you though, so keep watching this YouTube video until the end. So I was gonna go about another half an hour, and I just restocked the fire, but I thought that looking at the angle of the sun, that maybe I should just go ahead and shoot a clip now. Let's go ahead and take a look inside here and see what it looks like. First, before I open the lid, here is the temperature gauge, and we've got 160 on the right and 145 on the left. Now again, I just restoked the fire and got it all refilled and everything, so it kind of drops off. It's kind of hard to hold a stable temperature on a smoker like this at this low of a temperature. And when you're doing something like with an electric, that's one of the really nice things about using something like a digital Masterbuilt for salmon, which is probably my top choice, but it's really close because the Big Chief is just so reliable, it just takes a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and open this up. I brought out my instant read thermometer, and all my thermometers are Thermal Pros, and if you like a cheap, reliable thermometer, the link is in the bottom. That's an affiliate link, and I will get compensated for that. I see that it had a nice big poof of smoke there, but that's because I put in a couple of blocks of wood, and those blocks of wood, when they're starting to light up, generate a lot of smoke. So I'm gonna go to one of the thickest pieces, and I think this is probably it right here. Right in the middle. It's 127 in the middle, so that technically I would probably not eat that. Let's go over here to one of these thin pieces and see how it looks. That's 128, still right on the edge. I'm gonna go over here, right here, and just kind of grab a little piece right off the edge there where it's the hottest in the smoker, and we'll just go ahead and close this so that way it can get back to work, and then I'll just hold this button and turn this thing off. I'm gonna hold this out here like this, and let's see if you can get a look. I think you will be able to, because I'll be able to get a little sunlight on that. Let's see. One way or another, you'll be able to see one of those. Nice little pieces, right on the edge, so these are done, but they're not dry enough yet. That's coming along perfectly. Again, there's a lot of fat in this salmon. That is tasting amazing. I hesitate to say that the flavor might actually be better, what I'm getting results from now with this smoker, than one of the electric smokers. It's just for the total experience. My money's still on the electric smoker. I have done it with other charcoal, like the Masterbuilt vertical charcoal smoker, which is the one over here. And it has turned out, but it's ended up cooking just a little too hot, and so it ended up a little drier than what I wanted. Where with the regular digital Masterbuilt, you can get that temperature down in the 175 consistently and still generate smoke. Here, we've been bouncing all the way up to about 180 before I've been able to pull it back down. So I'll bring it up from 150 up to 180, and then I'll get it to hold for about an hour. And if I maintain the smoke and watch the stuff a little bit closer, it'd probably be fine. But I keep walking off and going and doing something else, like playing with my fishing gear or whatever. And then when I come back, I'm like, oh man, I was gone too long. We're gonna go ahead and let this run for probably another 3 hours before I talk to you again. That'll just be 1 second for you. So I just checked the salmon and it looks like we're about there. First thing I want to note is that we got a little extra help from the sun. This is a really hot day out and we're in direct sunlight, which is never my favorite thing. Now, I could have brought the canvas and put a tarp out above here, but I just decided not to since this is charcoal. I don't like to kind of box it in. I like to give it as much air as possible. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open the firebox to prevent any more heat from going in here, and we'll just let it burn out like it is. Then I'm going to go ahead and open this, and then we can take a look. We did run a little over 180 for a little bit of time in there, and that's about where we're at right now. So the edges got a little crisper than what I was going for. But it's still, when I did the sample, still tasted really good. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull those probes out, get them out of our way. Probes are going to be really hot, so we're going to go ahead and pull that out with the glove. If you really think that you're tough enough, you could probably pull them out with your hand if you don't mind a little second-degree burn. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull one of these sheets off of here. So it just stuck just a little bit right in the middle, but between pulling on it and pushing the cookie sheet underneath there, it actually came right up. I'll go ahead and set this one right there. Make sure the salmon is to the back. We don't want it falling. Let's go ahead and turn it around. I've been sampling on the other edge, so we don't want to look at that on the camera anyway. And my plan to put the thicker pieces on the left side worked out pretty well. They're very evenly cooked, and these bigger, thicker pieces got the brunt of the heat, which is just fine. Now that I've got the salmon out of there, I'm actually going to go ahead and close this. I want to continue to heat that chamber up a little bit more to burn off a little bit of the salmon residue that's in there. And I might actually take those grills and take them over to the propane grill and just burn off any of that oil. I don't want a salmon oil flavor to get in whatever my next food is, which we're getting really close to doing a brisket on this thing, so we want to get any fish flavor out. Now, you can see this here, and I'm going to actually bring this up here so you can get a really close look at it. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take it and I'm going to vacuum seal it in small packages. Usually I put 2 to 3 pieces in a package. Sometimes I'll do a few of them as singles, just as to take along with snacks. I am very particular about my food safety, and so I won't just leave this laying around. I will keep it refrigerated all the time. I will keep it frozen for long term, and for short term it'll stay in the refrigerator in the back in the coldest spot. Other than that, no exceptions. I just don't go anywhere other than that with food safety. I'm going to go ahead and take this one that I flavored. I'm going to take a piece of that, and it is hot. You can see there's still plenty of oil in there. It's salmon, Chinook salmon has a lot of oil in it, so it makes it nice. I'm going to turn this over. Now that's one of the pieces with the Cajun seasoning, and wow, that is good. I put a nice little coat on there, and it turned out really good there. I think it has a better flavor than the electric, but it was a lot more work. It's a pretty good chunk off of that end piece right there, and I'll go ahead and show that to you so you can see it. And this is an example of what you can do with a salmon that's not the highest quality. Some of this salmon was what they call a tule, which is a low river salmon. And they're really not the best salmon for eating right off for dinner. If you get a good one and you cook it right away while it's fresh, you can still get some pretty good fish, but fall salmon is probably one of my favorite things to smoke because it just adds so much to it. Let's go ahead and try the regular. Wow, that is really good. I didn't put honey on the top. Normally I would do something like that. And I think that I can still taste the honey from the brine, but it's not overdone, like it's just not piled full of sugar. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop a couple pictures here of some pieces vacuum sealed so that way you can see what they look like when I'm all done. I'm gonna let this sit on the counter for about 2 hours to come to room temperature. And as soon as it's fully at room temperature, then I'll go ahead and vacuum seal it up. So I just wanted to make this video so that way you would know that you can get great smoked salmon out of a Char-Griller Smokin Pro E1224. If you like this or anything that you've seen in this video, there is affiliate links down below. I will get compensated for that, so thanks for watching. Directly below, you're gonna see an article there that is my electric smoking salmon article. That article contains the recipe that I use for the brine on this, and then you can add any topping. In today's video, I added brown sugar to this, and then brown sugar and the Cajun spice to this, and that's a sweet Cajun. It could use a little bit of a kick to it, and a little bit of cayenne pepper would have really gone a long way on that. So again, thanks for watching, and have a great day.